All right, so today I am joined by Maddie Namer from the queer musical group, the FMs. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good, good. So tell me,
Mhm.
how excited are you for the release of the FM's new album, 51122?
Yeah, we've been working on it for a long time, so I am excited to release it. I guess like almost more like cathartic is how I would describe it than excited.
Okay, okay.
Um, I think it was like a unique journey for me because these are the last songs that my former bandmate who passed away, Frankie Rex, has ever sang on. And so when they passed away, they had all these recordings, all of these vocal things that we had been working on, um, that I've sort of felt this responsibility to get released
Hmm.
into the world and get the world to see it. So, um, yeah, I mean, I think on a personal level, honestly, it's like after a 2.5 year journey with that it's cathartic.
Definitely. And the meaning behind 51122, it stands for May 20 or May 11th, 2022. That's the day that Frankie passed away. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So why did you decide to name the album that?
I was interested in the way it was a kind of the way it was iconic in a sense. I don't know that I've ever really seen anyone name an album after a date, and the date itself, um, it just felt like it had a kind of iconography.
Hmm.
So it felt fitting as the last works that they had done to be titling it that in honor of them. I did also really appreciate how when I looked at that date written out without any slashes or dots, that it almost looked like a word. Um, and so I appreciate things that can take on multiple meanings
Hmm.
and really was intrigued by how we could create some lettering around that where it's not immediately obvious that it's a date.
Definitely. Well, for those who have never heard of the FMs, how would you describe your musical style and aesthetic, and what can listeners expect from 51122?
Yeah, it's always a tricky thing to do to like describe your music in words or to try to like pigeonhole yourself in a way, right? But I think more and more our our trans identity as a band has always been really important
Hmm.
on a conceptual level. And on a musical level, I think that we play off a lot of influences around synthesizer music, punk music, so sort of like trans girl synth punk sort of thing.
Okay. Well, have you always gravitated towards that sense? Wow, can I say synthesizer based music?
Yeah, definitely. I've always been really interested in rock music that expanded beyond the sonic framework of guitar bass drums that we're used to hearing as the sort of standard in rock music,
Hmm.
and where sonic landscapes can go beyond that. So still incorporating the power and the intimacy of a rock song,
Hmm.
but adding like a whole other sonic landscape. So, I've always been like a big Pink Floyd fan, for instance.
Hmm.
Or like Nine Inch Nails in later years, or bands like Muse, or other acts that are kind of breaking boundaries in that way. So yeah, it's something I've always been interested in.
Awesome. So, the FMs was started by you and Frankie. How did you two originally meet, and how did the FMs originate?
We met in high school and were in each other's first band,
Okay.
and grew up musically together. We kind of had different backgrounds, even though we've known each other for so long.
Hmm.
Frankie came from a um, like area in Queens called College Point. Had like attended all girls Catholic school, um, is Latino. I grew up in Manhattan to artsy white parents, um, and attended, Stuyvesant, which is like a public magnet school kind of thing with a lot of other sort of artsy things. So, and we kind of lived on opposite sides of the city. We actually met through my first girlfriend ever. But, obviously we continued our relationship throughout different periods of our lives, which is kind of a unique thing to share with someone. And our connection, it went beyond just music, but like it really had always been, I think, a lot about our queer identities and the ways that we matured into them
Hmm.
over time,
Yeah. Hmm.
and our shared love of music. And we got to do a lot of amazing collaborations over the years. Frankie is an unbelievable vocalist and also somebody that has a really relatable perspective just
Hmm.
on a human level. So we really lost somebody who had a lot to contribute to the world in that way.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we started the FMs together in 2016. So we had sort of at that point in our lives kind of reconnected and realized that we had this interesting opportunity to develop this concept around the band of us both being transgender, but sort of like approaching it from this opposite perspective. So we were always an interesting complement to one another.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do you think Frankie would have thought of 51122?
I'm sure they would have thought it was really awesome. I'm sure they would have been really excited to release this music.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of the songs they had heard the final version of because we released them as singles while they were alive.
Yeah.
So those songs would have been My Sex, Record Store, Triangle. Um, and then they heard the other songs in various versions, but not really the final product for any of the rest of them.
Hmm.
But they're singing on all of them. One of the songs off that album, "Hurt," we was actually the first FM song that Frankie and I ever worked on. It was a song that they had written, and had, I think, even played it in their previous band. And we did sort of an early recording of it, and it kind of sat in the annals of my, project folders for a long time. And then we kind of reworked that song with our producer, David Warner. So, I mean, some of the songs off this album, they wouldn't have even known that we had done.
Hmm.
It's really like that one in particular. It's almost a little weird to be like, hey, we took your song and we did this whole like epic arrangement for it and did all these things, and you never will get to hear it. That is just so strange to me.
Hmm.
Unless, they have some kind of spiritual attunement into the mortal realm while they can hear it or something.
Yes, yes. Well, is there anything you ultimately hope listeners take away from this album?
I hope that they can appreciate it as an album.
Hmm.
That's definitely something that as an art form I've always been really drawn to.
Yeah.
I think that a song will tell a story, an album can tell an epic, and so there's a lot more to dive into there as an art form.
Hmm.
And I hope it feels cohesive, that people can get a strong sense of who the FMs are, that our message resonates with them,
Hmm.
and that they can also feel and relate to emotionally the ways that we've tried to break boundaries sonically.
Yeah. Hmm. Awesome. Well, the FMs will celebrate the release of 51122 on November 23rd with a record release show at NYC's Berlin. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. And this album also follows Pink and Black, your sophomore record, which was released earlier this year. How would you say the FMs are continuing to evolve as artists?
I always have this probably somewhat mistaken belief that the next song I'm working on will always be like my best song. Even though I've been at this for a long time.
Mhm.
I'm really excited for where we can take the band. In a lot of ways, I'll admit that I'm excited for the creative freedom that will come from ending this chapter of releasing Frankie's music.
Mhm.
And I am feeling more and more that we have an opportunity to kind of lean into a place that hasn't really been occupied so much. I have the amazing privilege of getting to work with three other trans girl musicians up here in Ithaca, New York,
Mhm.
uh, who have incredible taste and style and are unbelievable musicians and bring all these kinds of other perspectives to us. So at the moment, I want to lean into this kind of trans baby girl Barbie synth punk vibe,
Mhm.
and I'm really excited to kind of like see where that takes us. There's a lot to talk about in this day and age.
Definitely, I agree. So once the album comes out, what's next for the band?
I'm definitely going to focus more on seeing, us expanding into different towns, playing more like regional tours,
Mhm.
which is something we started doing this year. We just started performing again in May of this year and had been on it. Actually, the FMs went through a 4-year period where we hadn't played any shows. We did our last show with Frankie on March 12th, 2020. And, it
Right
was
before
like,
COVID.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then, it was COVID for a while and then they passed away. So then there was like a period of time after that where the FMs were dormant until kind of one day, I reconnected with my emotional capacity to produce music and found my direction and realized that maintaining the FM's name was the best way to honor them.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, look what we're doing right now. We're talking about them.
Hmm. Exactly.
So that felt like a good decision. And we, yeah, started performing again this year in May. Have done a lot of really cool stuff since then. We've performed in some different areas up here in Ithaca, Brooklyn. Um, we did a show in Rochester recently. So definitely looking to do more shows around like New York State, Pennsylvania, New Jersey,
Nice.
Northeast, seeing how we can tap into some festivals. And on a musical level, I'm excited to try to work on more collaborations next year for sure.
Okay.
But also kind of taking the band in a little bit more of a unified direction. I think
Hmm.
that coming back into making music again, a lot of the songs that I have been working on this year and a little bit last year, um, they're kind of diverse.
Yeah.
I'm sort of exploring like the different influences that I've had over time, whether that's kind of a more ambient, even like sort of direction that you might, like Tame Impala kind of influences, or some of my, 90s alternative rock influences, like a band like Filter or something like that, or Garbage, um, and then also really diving into kind of more retro-y things, I guess you could say, like the new wave when it was first established with bands like the Cars, or like Elvis Costello, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Uh, I think on a stylistic and kind of delivery way, I feel a lot of like kinship with the New York Dolls,
Hmm.
especially coming out of New York City and the ways in which they were this kind of proto punk band who also had this whole gender bending thing in a period of time where that was like very revolutionary and new.
Definitely.
Even their name, like dolls, I think is really kind of an interesting association. I know a lot of like trans girls like that term, and I do too for myself. Um, so yeah, I think that's I'm excited. I'm excited for 2025 and where we're gonna head.
Awesome, fantastic. Well, how can one stay up to date with the FMs?
Yeah, I mean, anytime anyone listens to our song on Spotify, watches our video on YouTube, buys a piece of merch from us, it's really such a meaningful act. It really each of those little things, it just feels so meaningful to us. So I always would encourage people to do that. It is like just even a positive, loving thing you can do for the world to support underground artists.
Hmm.
Uh, so even if it's just not us, like listen to your friends' music online, listen to, bands that you just met in your town, whatever,
Yeah.
it really means a lot to us.
Hmm.
And in terms of like where to stay in touch with us, generally speaking, if you Google the FMs, you'll find things. But Spotify, YouTube, our website is the fmsmusic.com. On Instagram, we're at the FMs. And pretty much just like all over all the platforms, TikTok, Bandcamp, the
All right.
usual.
Yes, perfect. Well, then before we wrap up, are there any other upcoming projects or anything else you'd like to mention or plug at this time?
Ooh. Um, I don't think so. I mean, you know, I'm always interested in like what the next thing for us right now. I'm like really excited. I'm working on a song called Estrogen Junkie. I'm thinking a lot about the ways in which trans people are really at risk in our country. We have been, but elections really mark big forks in the road for where we're going as a world society.
Hmm.
And we're in a lot of danger right now. And it's hard to say to what extent those dangers will become reality, but I do, I am thinking a lot about the ways in which it is completely possible that we end up in a world where there's mass detentions in this country,
Hmm.
that trans people are, you know, a part of that. I think we're kind of like first in line in the firing squad in this
Yeah,
country.
I agree.
And it's pretty much something you can see pretty clearly with the fact that the GOP spent over $200 million attacking trans people in ads
Hmm.
for this election cycle. So it's an interesting time for our community.
I agree, definitely.